Prepare to experience the strongest radio allowable by law. Secrets will be revealed. Myths dispelled. From the studio gym where excuses never apply, it's Superhuman Radio with your host, Carl Lenore.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of Superhuman Radio. We have an insightful show for you today. We're going to cover two really exciting topics, actually. During the first hour, we're going to be talking about physics, electromagnetic radiation, and the human body. It's a discussion that is not entertained. I'm sorry about my, I'm trying to get my green screen adjusted here, but it's not cooperating. It's a topic that is not discussed often enough by mainstream physicians. And after today's show, I think you're going to be very convinced that it should be. Then later in the show, we're going to talk about a new study, a very large study done with tens of thousands of people that looks at the effects of high glycemic carbohydrates in heart disease and stroke. And if this study doesn't change the discussion about red meat and fat and cheese, being the link to heart disease, then we are just a bunch of fact-resistant human beings, which I am quite worried about. We've lost all critical thinking skills, and sadly, people just do whatever they're told nowadays. But anyway, okay. Before we do any of that, we have to thank our title sponsor, and that's Legendary Foods. If you go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use the code SHR10, you can save 10% off everything from seasoned almonds, delicious nut butters, but more importantly, the new tasty pastry. There are two different types of tasty pastry. There's the old-fashioned one, and then there's the new cake style. And the new cake style are amazing. They are actually fluffier. The original tasty pastry was designed to be a healthy replacement for a Pop-Tart. The new tasty pastry has fluffier, flakier crust and 20 grams of high-quality protein, less than 1 gram of sugar. The favorite of the nation right now is the red velvet. If you go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use the code SHR10, you can buy some. Or if you listen during the commercial breaks for the secret word, email it to onair@superhumanradio.net. Please include your mailing address. You could be one of the several lucky listeners from today's show. So take a chance and you'll be pleasantly surprised. And now without further delay, sorry about that. Wrong image. My first guest today is Dr. Asad Choudhry. Welcome to the show, Asad.
Thank you so much, Carl. Good to be here.
Now, I promise you that this is going to be a fascinating discussion. It's actually a discussion that is important, especially because over the past 15 years, we've kind of talked around this topic, and we're going to talk specifically at it today. So before we start to discuss this information, talk about yourself. You have an early education in physics and mathematics, but then you decided to become an MD. Talk about that.
Yeah, my kind of early academic dream was to get into theoretical physics. And This is foolish idealism. I really didn't understand. This is what kind of made me move away from that, because when I went for my graduate sort of like interviews at like different colleges, they asked me what I wanted to do, this and that, and I really was interested in like searching for the nature of reality. I said that goofy stuff, right? And so the professors kind of laughed at me. He's like, "That's not what we do here." And I'm like, "All right, bro." I mean, like, I didn't know what to think about that. So that kind of made me a little disillusioned about that, because I had, really believed that, like, of all the sciences, physics is the deepest. So it's going to help us, get closer to these deep questions. So the social aspects of what was going on there, and it was all about publish or perish. That kind of, made me not really interested in it. I have my father's a cardiologist. I have 2 first-degree relatives with pretty severe Crohn's disease. So I was always interested in health from that point of view. I always thought of medicine as too soft of a science growing up, too vague and imprecise. Right. So that threw me. That's why I didn't really care about going into it. But my own interest in my health, I trained as an athlete. Then I helped out my mother. I helped my sister. These sort of like little things, tinkering around early biohacking before it was called biohacking, was basically what made me interested in getting into medicine. I had already known it was a profit-driven system with all of its drawbacks beforehand. I wanted to be a force for good within it. Again, I came against a lot of pushback. As you know this probably quite well, is that this is a powerful system of indoctrination, and they're trying to stamp you with a certain point of view of reality by the time you get out.
Well, and let's talk about this for a second. Let's just stay with this for a second. I'm sorry if there's an echo coming back at people. I hear it a little bit now. Try to figure out where it's coming from. But the pharmaceutical companies pay for the labs that you have in medical schools. They fund these medical schools. They fund entire curriculums. And they do that for a reason. It's not selfless. It's because they get to touch you as you start to become a doctor. They start to talk to you about drugs. They start to talk to you, and they have a halo because they have entire wings of schools dedicated to promoting the science that they want to promote. And quite frankly, it's really unfair. It's universities shouldn't allow this because it causes biases. And we have something today called standard of care. And it sounds like a really good thing. Oh, I'm getting the highest care standard because doctors are forced, maybe not overtly, but with the threat of lawsuits. Oh, well, you didn't follow the standard of care. We have to sue you now. The standard of care is not the best treatment for you. It's the preferred treatment of the pharmaceutical agenda.
Yep.
And we have a little latency in the internet today. Assad, if you can't hear me, you kind of froze here.
Pretty much. Yes, here, because to help people all the way, there's plenty of doctors you can get drugs from, so I'm not going to do that. However, what I noticed was like, okay, this isn't what I thought it was in terms of like, this is a complex medical legal framework. I don't even know, monolith. And if let's say I have and I can't stay on top of every patient because there's too many patients. So let's say I got Carl, I'm not going to put you on Lipitor. We're going to do all these lifestyle changes. Here's what I want you to do, blah, 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 blah. You have a heart attack 2 months later. Even with the lifestyle positive changes, you might have a heart attack anyway, but it might be less severe than it would have been before. But who knows? This gets lost in translation. They come back to me. It's like, did you put him on Lipitor? Did you put him on this? I did not. I'm all of a sudden in court now as a neglectful doctor. And I was like, it scared me enough to be like, I don't think I can do this psychologically because I know how harmful these drugs are. And even every medical student should be able to read the mechanism of action of these drugs and think, like, is this a good idea? And the fact that they don't do that makes me realize that, no offense to other doctors out there, I really don't want to offend anybody, but too many of them get into it for very superficial reasons and not deep intellectual curiosity and an absolute, rigorous integrity to the truth. So I don't think that's fine for Wall Street. That's fine for all different arenas of for selling stuff. But when it comes to healthcare and someone's healing and life and that, I don't agree with that. So that kind of pushed me to leave. I was like, I'm gonna get in trouble for trying to do the right thing, and they're gonna cuff me up, and I don't want to deal with this. So that's kind of what made me want to not do it. After that point, I jumped to San Francisco because I fell for these TED Talk kind of BS, right? They said, like, okay, we're going to disrupt healthcare, use innovation. We're going to get all these interdisciplinary things, and we're going to make magic happen. Oh my God, such a foolishness on my part. I did not know what these people were up to. They're raising money, doing nothing for gimmicky stuff, and just wasting time talking about stuff like Burning Man. I mean, these are. When I got there, I felt like, because I had such a deep, training in meditation, and I understood what these shamans do. I had a lot of this yogi stuff I did on my own. When I saw these people, like, they were just like weird children who had gotten too much money, acting like power players, like in some corny movie. And I was like, I don't want to be a part of this. And a lot of them were doing fraud in terms of the ones who were doing healthcare stuff, because they have to figure out some way to make their service worthwhile to get into the insurance system. So one company I left very early on, they didn't really like me that much either. But I found out later that they basically were guilty of doing insurance fraud on microbiome testing, overcharging to the point where the FBI raided their office. This is a company they're worth $100 million, valued at $600 million. So think about that. They were about to become like a mini Theranos kind of situation.
Right.
So I saw this kind of egotistical, superficial thinking even in SF, in the tech side. So I was like, I'm done with that. I wanted to jump into research. I already knew the research model in the way that how they look at the body, how they approach cell biology is incomplete. But I thought I can get in there and kind of, shake things up a little bit and maybe get them to fund some research that's more kind of what I think is more important, like light-based research, meaning like, what's the effect of, natural versus artificial light? What do different frequencies do to cells? So I couldn't really raise money for that. On top of that, this whole CV-19 stuff became quite suppressive.
Yes.
I couldn't get I had a bad reaction to the flu shot in residency, where basically I got a very severe flu, which no big deal. I can shake that off, but I lost the ability to swallow voluntarily, like solid foods for like 6 weeks. I tried to tell them about it, but it was like, you know how it is, right? Like, it's
they don't want to hear you. This is
so
what medicine has become. Medicine has become to ignore facts, and actually this is something that we see in society by and large today. We have fact-resistant humans because there are no universal facts any longer. There's your facts and my facts, and I can find science to support mine, and you can find science to support yours. So it's really a scary time for critical thinking people, because I've been saying for the last decade, the new evolutionary selection pressure is where you get your information from. That will shape your life. That will shape your.
That's very.
So
it's a great point.
I want to talk now about some substance stuff. I want to talk about RF and EMF. So
right.
Thousands of years ago, the only RF or EMF we encountered was the Schumann resonance that emanates from the core of the earth, which actually has been proven to have shaped us. Just the way the sun has shaped us as a being, the Schumann resonance has shaped us. And of course, electromagnetic radiation that falls down upon us from the sun. These were really pretty much the only two, let's call them transmitters, that we ever encountered throughout millions of years of evolution. Right. Now, guys like Tesla, and now we find a way to actually generate frequencies. And fast forward to today, I am sitting in a room, and I've actually, people who follow me on Facebook know that last year I actually put a video of a spectrum analyzer, and it was all these waves living together, and then pips and spikes and waves, everything from 6-point-something gigahertz down to garage door openers, which are like 40 hertz. We live in this RF. We can't see it. Most of us can't feel it, but some people can. They're called crazy. And the idea that it's not doing something to us. Now, that could be bad something. It could be good something. But the idea that people go through life oblivious to this and think, well, I can't see it, it's not doing anything to me, is actually ignorant. And I use that word specifically because it's ignoring the evidence that we have. So let's talk about RF. When did you first become fascinated with electromagnetic fields?
Well, it came basically just out of like the physics background I had, and then wanting to apply that to understand, like, does any of this have anything to do with the body? Plus with meditation. Well, let's go back to the Schumann resonance. The 7.83 hertz, the way it's supposed to be, it not only shaped our evolution, that's alpha wave brain production, right? And what is that? A state of relaxed concentration.
Right.
That's where we're supposed to be living 24/7. We are not supposed to be outside, because our physics, actually, there's a standing wave in the center of the fluid. When you really are doing in deep harmonic resonance with the earth and deep meditation, you're generating standing waves at that Schumann resonance, and you're matching the exact environment, these original conditions, basically. We didn't, 150 years ago, whenever the Tesla and the World Fair happened, when they lit up the whole World Fair, and they started the whole AC electric stuff,
right?
That's when our environment really rapidly changed. Like, even compared to then, like it's probably 10 billion fold at this point, the amount of increase in radiation in terms of different electromagnetic frequencies that are artificial in nature generated in our sky. So we live all in the densest electromagnetic fog that humanity has ever experienced in terms of my knowledge of human history. In addition to that, it is increasing day by day exponentially. So when these commercials come on to be like, yeah, 5G, this, that, I mean, Internet of Things, connect your TV to your toothbrush, to your refrigerator, make everything integrated. This is a disaster. You are literally creating a electromagnetic prison for yourself that's going to devastate your physiology. Now, let's just look at the basic, easy stuff. EMF radiation has been shown to change the way that voltage-gated calcium channels work.
Right.
Okay. So you're going to efflux calcium into your bloodstream. So when you have elevated calcium, there's consequences to that are secondary, but the one that I care about is that it's going to confuse your vitamin D production system. So if I'm out in the sun, because part of what stimulates the vitamin D production is,
that's fascinating. I've never thought about that, because there are people who can't get their vitamin D levels elevated no matter what they do.
It's going to keep contradicting. You're fighting the system, because your body's going to sense the danger of having elevated calcium in the bloodstream, and so it's not going to want to be encouraging your body to produce vitamin D in the sunlight, because that's going to worsen the situation in terms. It's reading your bloodstream. It's saying too much calcium. The last thing we need is vitamin D. So it's going to shut that sort of whole mechanism up. You're basically
so let's talk about this so that people understand, because I'm deep into vitamin D science for years. So when you lay in the sun, aside from cholecalciferol being produced, there is also something called pre-vitamin D, which is a precursor to cholecalciferol. And we're not going to get into the melanocortin system, because that's a whole nother thing that has been ignored by and large, but is very valuable to us from a health standpoint. But if you lay in the sun for all day for a weekend, the body will actually receive signals, a negative feedback loop, telling your skin, we don't need anymore, destroy that. So your body doesn't only synthesize cholecalciferol, it destroys it too when it thinks it doesn't need any more. So what you're basically saying is the body is being told erroneously, because of elevated serum calcium levels, destroy this vitamin D. We don't need it. We've got a lot of calcium circulating already.
Exactly. You don't want elevated calcium in an oxidated sort of like vascular, basically. That's disastrous. That's why people turn into stone in their vasculature as they get older and older. So the consequences of this are this. If you're standing in the Amazon, you're out there, sunbathing, grounded to the earth, you're good to go. The system will figure everything out, no problem. Where I'm at in San Francisco, even if I'm outside sunbathing, I'm producing very little vitamin D and at great strain to my body simultaneously, right? So that's just one of 1,000 things going on. It inhibits mitochondrial function. RF has been shown to basically affect mitochondrial energy production. when you affect, so let's just connect this for 1 second slightly to the melanocortin system, that where do you think melatonin is made? Yeah, it's stored in your pineal gland and it is made there too, but what cellular organelle is making melatonin? Your mitochondria. So if I affect your mitochondrial, system, energy production, you're not going to have the power to generate and make as much melatonin as normal. Now, what's the most powerful antioxidant on Earth? Powerful anti-cancer dude, melatonin.
Right.
So if I keep hitting your mitochondria, I'm going to keep lowering your serum melatonin over and over.
Well,
again.
I want to take this off tangentially for a second, because you and I talked off the air. So there are three basic genomes today that we know about, right? And so one of them that's become very fascinated is the microbiome, and a lot of people are fascinated with that, thinking, well, this is where we need to focus. But there is research out there that shows that it's actually the mitochondrial genome that tells the microbiome genome what to do. Talk about that.
Yeah, let me unpack this. There was a study done, it published less than a month ago, where when a mouse is born, when a child is born, what establishes the microbiome? If it's a vaginal birth, it's the bacteria in the vaginal canal, and also the bacteria that ends up on their skin too. So they swallow. So that's that, right?
Yeah, mother breastfeeds, the baby actually gets a large amount of microbes from the areola, not just from the milk, but just from sucking on the skin.
Yeah, exactly. So it's all these combined factors, basically. So they say that once the microbiome is established, that's kind of going to dominate the situation, right? So that means that moves forward with them throughout life. So what they did here was, and this is very interesting, they took pups from two different sets of mothers, two different sets of mice that had distinct microbiome populations, as well as distinct mitochondrial genomes, right? Totally different. The pups were born, they switched the mothers, okay? So that means these opposite pups were now basically drinking milk from an opposite mother. So when they did that, what they found early on was that, when they were drinking the milk, there was a little bit of a pull towards the microbiome of the mother. But by 2 months of age, even though that early inoculation, that microbiome was done by the opposite mother, by 2 months of age, their microbiome automatically moved back to the same microbiome as their general lineage. So that basically showed that, okay, diet is important, sort of, but your body's going to go push back to this default setting that's aligned with your genetics and your ancestry. So that's fascinating, because that changes the flip. Because right now, a lot of people are going to be like, the microbiome, we're going to master it, master your GI microbiome. We're going to sell you something on that. Oh, your skin, we're going to do all this microbiome analysis of all these distinct areas. But it looks like your mitochondrial genome might be the most important thing. Now, in addition to that, what they've also found was that there are that when you have certain, basically, the question is this: you can have poor mitochondrial function is combined with certain inflammatory microbiomes. But it's the chicken or the egg. Who causes what? Who's more important, right? Is it having your bad diet feeding back and then injuring the mitochondria, messing their function up, or is it the mitochondria influencing the microbiome? So these same exact studies that were done on these pups, mouse pups, also showed that when you could take mitochondria and mutate them, right, in a way that would increase their reactive oxygen species, their free radicals, right, more oxidative stress, like transgenic manipulation. When they did that, that shifted the microbiome without any change in diet or lifestyle or anything else. So changing mitochondrial function was shift, and then the opposite is true too. If you improve mitochondrial function, that microbiome improved to a less inflammatory thing. So that was shocking to me.
And keep in mind that this fits nicely with Dr. Thomas Seyfried's work, cancer as a metabolic disease. Because what he showed was, by taking the dysfunctional mitochondria and putting it in a healthy cell, turned on the oncogenes, and not vice versa.
We have to talk about that too.
When they put the triggered oncogenes in the healthy cell, it didn't make it cancer. It was the mitochondria that changed first. And so this whole idea about changing genetics and fixing genetics is a waste of time.
No, listen, it was a good first stab at it. and they wanted to basically use the nuclear genome as like, we're going to master everything. And it fell apart. Where's the promises? The Human Genome Project was over a while ago. Do you see any functional progress that's changing your outcome and your quality of life in your life? It's just all market. It's all marketing hype, right? So it's good because, again, now forget the microbiome, just to reinforce what you just said, that when you keep the mitochondrial genome healthy, that keeps the nuclear genome quiet and functioning appropriately. It'll activate appropriately. But if you lose control of the cell and the mitochondrial energy production stops, that's when you start like yelling to, hey, nucleus, what's going on? What do we do? Should I go into apoptosis? Should I go into like necrosis? Should I go
aerobic respiration? Yeah.
Aerobic. Should I go into this Warburg respiration and turn to a cancer cell? What do I do? I'm scared. But if you maintain this, you're going to keep that quiet. And the quieter you keep that, the better it is for you. That's a memory store bank. You shouldn't be accessing that hard, deep core memory all the time. Your cell should be running on the health of your cytoplasm, your mitochondria, and that's how it's centered on that. And an important part of this whole thing is the idea that water is the perfect electromagnetic repository for all EMF radiation, artificial and natural. So it's the water that's being programmed by all these frequencies. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I want to. Before we take our first commercial break, I want to get into something real quick because I want to kind of set the stage for when we come back from the break.
Okay.
So we're going to talk about solutions. So
yes,
because we can't get rid of the RF. If anything, there's going to be more. They're moving higher and higher. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You dropped out. Okay. We're not going to be able to get rid of RF. In fact, I actually think, and I want to ask you this question: is this new technology, this new electromagnetic cloud that we live in, actually part of the new selection pressure? Are there people who are not going to fare well and just disappear from the gene pool 100 years from now, and those who are robust enough to live through it, they will actually? Are we culling the herd right now?
I wish it was just like a culling of the herd in the sense that it didn't involve, like, in a sense, possibly, if you don't inform yourself and you don't sharpen your whole wisdom about your body and mind, then yeah, in that sense, you would be culling it. You need to be informed and you need to understand what's going on. If you don't have interest in that, then that's problematic for their life. What you can't see can hurt you, unfortunately. So yeah, I can see it like as a selection pressure. You got to step your game up. It's no more trust somebody else and not experiment with yourself and really study the reality of your experience. So if you're lazy, you're in trouble.
We're gonna take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to start to talk about evidence that RF is actually affecting us, because there is a lot of research out there, quite frankly. Yes. But for some reason, people are very selective in what they want to believe today, because if it's an inconvenience, like, oh, but I love my iPhone, oh, I don't want to give up my iPhone. And this is really a dangerous attitude that we've adopted today. So let's do this. Let's take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back with more. Stay tuned. Yeah. TaylorMade Health is focused on making sure you're able to perform and look your best. They are a leader in game-changing supplements and cosmetic products. Whether you want to increase strength, expedite recovery, facilitate soft tissue repair, or reduce deep wrinkles, TaylorMade Health has you covered. TaylorMade Health is also the home to Dr. Seed's products such as BPC, BPC Plus, and the Chill Pill. All of my listeners can now get 20% off their first order with code TRY20. That's TRY20. This code can even be used on subscription orders. Visit shrnetwork.biz/TRY20 today and use code TRY20 for 20% off your first order. Every day, there's a new wellness trend. Eat that, do this, avoid those. How do you know where to start or who to trust? Inside Tracker helps you cut through the noise by analyzing your blood, your DNA, your lifestyle, and your fitness tracker to provide you with a science-backed, trackable action plan on how to live, age, and perform better. Personalized, one-size-fits-one recommendations to help you optimize you. For a limited time, Inside Tracker is offering Superhuman Radio listeners 25% off the entire store. Go to shrnetwork.biz/Inside Tracker, INSIDETRACKER, to save 25% off. Change begins on the inside. Frustration, Do you remember those delicious toaster pastries you had when you were a kid? You know, the rectangular sugar-filled snacks? Well, guess what? Legendary Foods has just made low-carb toaster pastry. This is the first of its kind, and honestly, these things are amazing. They have 3 to 4 net carb, less than 1 gram of sugar, and 9 grams of protein. You can eat them right out of the wrapper or lightly toast them. The only question is, which flavor, strawberry or brown sugar cinnamon? They're available at eatlegendary.com and Amazon. As a listener of this show, you know how important your gut is to your overall health. Bioptimizers has a potent product to heal and repair your gut unlike anything else. It's called Leaky Gut Guardian. It's powered by patented IGY Max, an egg-based protein that enhances gut health, reverses antibiotic damage, and strengthens your immune system. Available in 2 delicious powders, vegetarian vanilla and chocolate carnivore. Simply mix it with your favorite beverage. Repair your gut and power up your immune system risk-free and save 10% off. Go to shrnetwork.biz/leaky gut. Don't delay. Fix your gut today.
This is the Superhuman Channel, where we use oxygen for the power of good.
Welcome back. We're having a lot of internet latency today. I don't know if people are catching on, but things seem to be moving slow. I apologize for the production quality of today's show in advance. We're talking today with Dr. Asad Choudhry. He is a physician, but he's also trained as a physicist. I guess it's fair to call you a physicist because you trained in physics and mathematics.
Yeah, undergraduate, and I tried to apply it, but informally, you know. That
right, but the idea of straddling these two worlds, of giving you a unique perspective at 30,000 feet to look down and go see where they overlap. So I want to talk a little bit about RF, because I think the real problem is people really don't believe that RF has any kind of deleterious effect or any effect at all. So I want to talk about a quick story. When I was a young man, I was in the cellular telephone, mobile telephone paging business in Las Vegas, Nevada in my 20s. And we had a rooftop site on the Holiday Inn Center Strip in Las Vegas. And we were putting up a new folded dipole antenna that was on 467, 375 megahertz. And the technician who was doing the work for me, his name was Jack Crowley, wonderful guy. He's passed away since. So he told me when we were leaving the office, bring a fluorescent light bulb with me. I didn't know why. I had no idea why. So once we got the antenna up, it was a 10 dB gain antenna. We were putting 500 watts into it, which means that it was equivalent of 5,000 watts ERP, effective radiating power. And so he came up on the roof, and we had my friend John Babcock was in the equipment room, and he said to John, "Key the transmitter." So he keyed the transmitter, and he said he handed me the fluorescent light bulb, and he said, "Hold the light bulb parallel to the antenna." He says, "Get up next to it," and I did. He said, "Now back up slowly," and I backed up, and I backed up, and I backed up, and exactly 1/4 wavelength, the light bulb lit up in my hand.
Whoa.
And I looked at him and I was like, he goes, what's happening is, he goes, quarter wave, half wave, 3/4 wave, and full wavelength, you are becoming an antenna, and it's exciting the fluorescent gas inside the light bulb, and it's lighting up. That was the moment for me when I realized, oh my God, I can't see this stuff, but it's doing something. Now, fast forward to today. We have microwave ovens. We know that we can heat food with RF. And I'm not here saying, oh, your microwave oven is dangerous, throw it away. That's not what I'm saying. But let's not ignore the fact that you can friggin' cook with radio frequencies. Okay.
Right.
Doctors use ionizing radiation. This is just RF to shrink tumors. They use ionizing radiation at very, very low levels to see through your body and take pictures of your bones and your joints. I mean, so the idea that on one hand, we recognize that RF is very powerful, but on the other hand, we ignore the fact that we are living in a virtual soup of RF today. And one more thing I want to mention. there are odd number harmonics, third, fifth. So if you get two frequencies that collide, it's actually called a heterodyne. If you're listening to it on if you've ever been in your car and you had an AM radio station on and you went on the power wires, you could hear the EMF. Well, when you're between two stations, it sounds like cats fighting. That's called a heterodyne. That's in fact how your radar detector works to detect the radar gun that's pointing at you, because it's using a frequency shifted by about a quarter of a wave of a megahertz, and so it creates this sound. But anyway, when two frequencies collide, they make a third residual frequency that's completely a combination of those two. It's called a third harmonic. There are third, fifth, seventh. There are odd harmonic. So when you are living in an urban area like we are right now, I've got a Wi-Fi router next to me. I've got computer equipment that is generating RF as a form of EMF. I've got the RF router next to it. I got the cordless phone in his office. These are all colliding and making residual frequencies. We don't even know what those frequencies are. Nobody's sitting out here reading them.
Right. No, that's the reality of the situation. And if you are trying to assess the body, you have to take into account what this could be doing and how it functions. Like, they have gotten away with it. And even the idea of, like, warming tissue up, microwaving. See, for the longest time, they're like, okay, all it's doing is warming tissue up. Don't worry about it. Like, it's just a temporarily warming up the side of your head when you use it. But now they're finally starting to acknowledge that, there are effects to this that are separate and distinct from heating the tissue up. And the kind of now we have the studies, like, it's in animals mainly, right? Where the NTP study was the one done by the NIH, kind of the big official one, where they showed 2G, 3G, and RF radiation basically definitely increased tumors in the heart of mice, was causing tumors throughout the body. That's just one of 1,000 studies. Another study I read, this is all old stuff. If you expose chick embryos to this stuff and then study the mitochondria are ripped apart. They're elongated. There's heat shock proteins being expressed. The whole cell is distressed in a way that people don't understand. It's just that, there's a lot of money involved with keeping people ignorant about this.
We're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars. You don't think the cellular phone company is just going to go off?
Right. So I mean, like,
they're not giving up the ghost at all.
Carl, it's similar to me. It's very similar to what's going to happen. What happened with cigarettes?
Right. Tobacco
tried it for the long, and they're going to be in trouble because they're messing. What they're doing to children. Imagine a child who, by the time we're 25, 26, the cerebral cortex, the nervous system is done, and your skeleton is fully developed. You are a lot more shielded from this stuff. The younger you are, the more infant you are, all the way up into 12, 8, even late teenage, you're vulnerable. That body is getting these waves with no real protection. And kids are being tortured by having to stare at artificial lights and be around Wi-Fi in close proximity for extended periods of time. That should be child abuse, in my opinion.
So you just reminded me of a couple more studies I want to talk about. So there's a neuron in the brain of an infant called a mirror neuron that allows an infant to look up at its mom, and its mom is smiling down, and the infant proprioceptively knows that it's smiling back. These are called mirror neurons. They're part of the learning neurons. There is evidence in rodents that exposure of a fetus to the 900 to 2.4 gigahertz RF range, which is used in most cellular telephones today, actually destroys the mirror neurons in the forming brain. And there is other studies that say that the lack of mirror neurons could be contributing to the whole spectrum, children on the spectrum.
100%.
So there's that research. Then there's the undeniable research that came out of Scandinavia. Scandinavia is way ahead of us on cell phones because Nokia, all those companies, they were out there way before we had cellular here in the United States. Well, they've published so many good studies that show that just 8 hours of standby destroys sperm motility in men, making them infertile. And we have those studies. We have all of these friggin' studies that say RF is doing something. RF is doing something. But yet, I mean, if my phone is in my pocket, it's on airplane mode. I don't want a personal pocket radiator. I don't want it.
No, exactly. And even that, preferably completely off. You know what I mean? Because even when these things are on airplane mode, they've changed that quite a bit. Airplane mode isn't what it used to be.
Interesting.
So I can feel that stuff because my body, as you know, our whole body is a perfect electromagnetic antenna. So the more you sensitize it and become still and quiet, the more these frequencies become quite apparent to you, right?
Right.
But you're absolutely right. The evidence has been around since the 60s and 70s.
There's one more study I want to mention.
Please.
Anytime I see someone wearing his cell phone in his shirt pocket, I think of. So
I go crazy.
Chad Chile came on this show 2 or 3 years ago. They had published a study showing that cilia on cells act as antenna and pick up RF. And as we get into the higher frequencies, 2.4, 5, 6, those waveforms are smaller and smaller and smaller. So they are exciting the cilia that is down in the micron length now. And a study was published tying idiopathic mitral valve prolapse to RF exposure.
You have to send me this. I did not know that. That is fascinating.
We talked about it a few years ago, and now when I see people with the phone in their pocket, I immediately go, dude, man, don't keep your phone there. It's radiating right into your friggin' heart.
It's tragic. It's tragic, and the worst part is my own dad's a cardiologist, and I have to yell to him about this. I'm like, what are you doing? You have Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and cellular data on in your pocket. Are you out of your mind? Like it's I didn't even know about that, but that's powerful stuff to show that it can affect morphology. It's not just cell function. It's going to change the morphology of something as big as a valve. That's shocking to me. Most of the effects to me is subcellular, cellular level, right? That's right. A big deal. I have to check that out. Fascinating.
So WS asked the question, he's watching on YouTube. He says, possible thoughts on increased cardiac events during solar storms. And I guess CME is what? What does CME stand for?
Continuing medical education?
I don't know. But obviously, what about just the RF that we live in? Do we see the possibility, especially when you talk about calcium channel activity? We know that calcium channel activity is linked to cardiac events.
That too, and plus on top of that, and I've seen this with a lot of people. Like, do I know any studies offhand whether it messes up with but I know there's some experience that it affects the conduction system of the heart. It is altering its flow. It's making your heartbeat flutter faster than it would. It's altering the coherence of the message traveling through the heart. It's doing a lot of different things. But that's more from instinct and feel and knowing the physics of it. I have to double check a study about that. But I see it all the time. Once I tell people, hey, listen, put it in airplane mode, never put it close to your chest, all of a sudden, their anxiety, their sort of dread that they didn't understand where it was coming from, it disappears. I'm like, yeah, you are an antenna. And if you put this thing that close to the center of your chest, you're going to have problems. So it's variation. Some people don't feel anything. Some people are quite powerfully affected by it.
So I want to take our last commercial break of this interview. And when we come back, I want to talk about remedies. I want to give people some solutions because we can't get rid of RF. I'm not going to get rid of my cell phone because it's an integral part of my functioning day.
I need to use it too. So, yeah.
So let's do this. Let's take a quick break. And we also have a couple more questions we will get to. Stay tuned. You are listening to and watching Superhuman Radio. Please share the show. You're not going to hear this kind of stuff anywhere else. Stay tuned.
New Mass Pro Synthogen X2 just upped its own legendary game. To distance itself even further from the rest of the pack, Synthogen X2 now has double the key active ingredients. If you've ever wondered what steroid-like recovery feels like, Synthogen X2 delivers. See why others compare it favorably to powerful bodybuilding drugs at synthogen.com. Mass Pro Synthogen. When you train with it, you'll gain with it.
The power of light can be truly life-changing and an important element for every superhuman. Because of this, I want you to experience the power of award-winning Seluma light therapy. Seluma utilizes NASA research technology to improve health at the cellular level and is cleared by the FDA to effectively treat a variety of pain, muscle and joint conditions, as well as facial wrinkles and acne. Our entire team here at Superhuman Radio uses it. Its innovative shape-taking design allows for easy placement anywhere on the body. Choose from 13 different models. For an exclusive listener discount, go to shrnetwork.biz/Seluma, that's CELLUMA, and use code SHR10 to save 10% off of one of these award-winning devices. Whether your goal is to build muscle or burn fat, you'll find everything you need at Redcon One. Need help getting a good night's sleep? Try Fade Out, or the most popular pre-workout supplement on the market today, Total War. Sign up for their new Transformation Challenge and win $10,000, or shop for apparel that people at the gym will know that you are serious about your training. Need a testosterone booster that works? Check out Boomstick. Whatever you need, you'll find the best quality supplements on the market at Redcon One. Go to redcon1.com. That's REDCON, the number 1.com, or go to superhumanradio.net and click the Redcon One banner ad today. TaylorMade Health is focused on making sure you're able to perform and look your best. They are a leader in game-changing supplements and cosmetic products. Whether you want to increase strength, expedite recovery, facilitate soft tissue repair, or reduce deep wrinkles, TaylorMade Health has you covered. TaylorMade Health is also the home to Dr. Seed's products such as BPC, BPC Plus, and the Chill Pill. All of my listeners can now get 20% off their first order with code TRY20. That's TRY20. This code can even be used on subscription orders. Visit shrnetwork.biz/try20 today and use code TRY20 for 20% off your first order. Frustration. Do you remember those delicious toaster pastries you had when you were a kid? You know, the rectangular sugar-filled snacks? Well, guess what? Legendary Foods has just made low-carb toaster pastry. This is the first of its kind, and honestly, these things are amazing. They have 3 to 4 net carb, less than 1 gram of sugar, and 9 grams of protein. You can eat them right out of the wrapper or lightly toast them. The only question is, which flavor, strawberry or brown sugar cinnamon? They're available at eatlegendary.com and Amazon.
Spit that out right now. This is the Superhuman Channel.
Welcome back. Later in the show, we're going to talk about the effects of high glycemic carbohydrates on cardiac events and stroke. Very fascinating. This should be a very important discussion to add to what we do know about the effects of poor nutrition with Dr. David Jenkins. He'll be joining us at the top of the hour, so stick around for that. Right now, we're talking with Dr. Asad Choudhry, and we're talking about the effects of RF and EMF on the body that are undeniable. This is not, when we start talking about this stuff, people are like, oh, do you wear an aluminum hat? You know, no, we know that RF incident on tissue has effects, and we're ignoring a lot of it today. So what can people do if they are, so people who are, there are people out there who are electrosensitive already, and they have to literally live lives without too much RF, no routers in their house. So on. But what does the average person do who says, look, I'm not electrosensitive, but I also believe that RF is doing something to me. What do I do?
Right. No, so let me add one more component to the RF idea. When we talk about EMF, we have to talk about actual artificial light too.
Artificial light. I'm sorry, you were dropping out there.
EMF as well. Okay. Yeah, artificial light, all of it put together. Because, and I just want to quickly review why that's important. Because what enters your eyes is, there's a pathway in your eyes called the retinal hypothalamic pathway. So we know that that's responsible for sending the information from the light to tell you what the circadian rhythm is, and also what time of day it is, and what hormones to produce, what hormones to release. So we know that this blue light here basically messes with the whole melanopsin system, which doesn't let you release melatonin properly, and messes up sleep hardcore, releases too much dopamine, which the consequences of that aren't just low mood. It's not just taxing your dopamine, it's releasing pituitary hormones and other hypothalamic hormones inappropriately. So artificial light, and we'll get to maybe we have a different podcast where we really dig into that, because everything starts centrally through your eyes are really the most important organ to protect. So become very, very vigilant about not staring at blue light, because it's powerfully changing not only your perception of time, but your dopamine levels and screwing with all your hormones.
Well, I want to talk about that, because there are a lot of people who wear blue block. I wear blue blockers at night.
I have them. I have them. I tend to wear them all day.
But isn't it inappropriate to wear them all day? Because if you and I were outdoors, I actually have a spectrum analyzer on my phone, and if you and I were outdoors at this time of day, we would get a considerable, about a third to a quarter of the light that would enter our eye would be blue. Why would we want to block it in the daytime?
Because it matters what kind of light it is. Artificial light is polarized and mechanical and different than living light. The blue light in the sun is unpolarized and it has a completely different quality. And there's living information in that light that goes way beyond what science understands, number one. So you are going to have some of the same effects on the blue light from fake blue light, but I tend to want to block it and then go outside and get the real blue light. And plus, people have to understand that even windows are filtering so many frequencies of light that being indoor, sunlight through a window ain't the same as sunlight outside. It's a big difference. All the UV is being blocked. Other frequencies are being blocked. So yeah, you want to be careful. Artificial blue light is not how you want to get your daytime, power. Blue light powers you up. It builds dopamine as well. So you don't want to get it from that. So I would preferentially always block blue light. Even my laptop, it took me a while to get used to it, but I'll have my laptop all the way down to a color temperature of 1900 during the day. Normal screen color temperature is 5750 Kelvin, right? That's equivalent to pulling the blue part of the spectrum out of the sun at noon. So and not just at noon, but also noon in the summertime. So there's consequences to looking at a noon level blue light in the winter. Our circadian rhythm isn't just daily, it's annually, and these are longer rhythms, ultra rhythms, right? So that's one thing I want to bring. So in understanding how light affects physiology, hormone production, and accelerates aging if it's incorrect. So blocking the blue light, making sure you have a pretty good filter on your screen, and making sure that your ratio of natural to artificial light is appropriate. Okay. Now that's not the world we live in. We're all staring at screens way too much. That means we got to begin to cut down. Just like kids with candy, we have to cut down and minimize it and use it just for when we desperately need it, and move back over to paper. As a paper or some other Kindle device that has a different screen that doesn't do this stuff, because this isn't flat light. The screen is pulsating and flickering in a way which generates tremendous fatigue as well for your eyes. So blocking that is important. That's one. Two, and we'll talk about some of the hacks in the house that you'd mentioned before. Two, every time you're barefoot on the earth, even in the middle of a city, you're actually temporarily protected from all the EMF. So the second you're barefoot, your field around your body sort of seals you off from the effects of EMF. So that's why grounding isn't just for decreasing inflammation; it's a survival technique in high density urban areas. You desperately.
So I did an experiment. I took a volt ohm meter, and I stuck one end of the probe in the grounded side of an AC outlet, the third prong. Yeah. And then the other end, and I recommend you don't do this at home, folks.
Yeah, don't do this.
I put the other end of the probe in the stream of shower, and it went to ground. So when you shower, you're grounding. And that might be why people, when they feel so good when they shower, they get out. It's not just the stimulation of the water on the skin, but you are grounding for that period of time that you're in the shower.
You are. You're sinking down into the earth, in essence, really. And so, yes, exactly. That's why water is such a benefit. It really is because of that, basically. Plus some of the ions you might be getting from the mist and the rest of it too. But so grounding, protecting your eyes, really, you should think of your eyes as your brain. You don't separate the two. Don't just treat it like, if you think about the optic nerve, if you look at the way it's set up and connected, it's connected to like 48% of your brain. That's a lot of connections for the optic nerve. It's not like that for anything else. And the more natural light you get, see, before you even move on, the remedies are natural light, nature immersion, and people understand that sunlight does way more than just vitamin D production. Sunlight's going to lower your blood pressure. Sunlight's
Right.
going to help you fight infections. It's going to boost your immune system. It's going to make T cells more motile, more aggressive. It has. I just posted a paper where UVB radiation, ultraviolet B radiation, basically works to reverse and improve atherosclerosis. So,
Oh, I know.
but
I did that. Melanotan 2 is responsible for the melanocortin
Yes.
stimulating hormone is responsible for that phenomenon. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And what people need to understand that if you get up early in the morning and you let your retina get sunlight directly, nakedly, no glasses, no contacts, nothing, you actually, the more sunlight you get hit your retina directly, you're going to release POMC centrally from your hypothalamus. That breaks down into some melanocortin stuff, also breaks down into beta endorphin. So we're actually built to be addicted to sunlight through our eyes. The way we've been built, so all day long.
And now all of a sudden it's bad for us. You know, I have to get you back on the show. We have to. So here's what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
So for those of you listening to this discussion and want more, maybe you have specific questions. So if you send your questions to onair@superhumanradio.net, we'll get Dr. Choudhry back on the show. We'll ask your question specifically, and we'll explore this to a great degree.
Yes.
But in summary, grounding, natural light as often and as frequently as possible. And I also unplug the cordless phone and router in my home every night. Now, I can't.
Absolutely.
I live out. We moved out into the country, and we're very far from our neighbors, and so I don't have somebody right. But and I actually took my spectrum analyzer to see what's out there, and there's virtually nothing. But I unplugged the local transmitters in the house at night.
You should. Everyone should do that. If you have the power to do that, I can't do it because I live in housemates with other like medical people. So they're not gonna. They all have tons of like basically devices and Wi-Fi. They even have Wi-Fi boosters. I can't do that. Are you kidding me? I would do that in a second if I had my own house. 100%, no doubt about it. At nighttime, I don't want anything messing with the water and in my body at all. I need it to be still. And I can't have this radiation shaking all the water molecules in my body. They're shaking us. It's
never mind water molecules. There's two good studies that show that if you have a cellular telephone call where you hold the phone up to your head, within a half hour of going to bed, there is a deep sleep latency seen by 2.5 hours. It takes you 2.5 hours longer than normal to get into deep sleep. And we know that RF has an excitatory effect on brain neurons. This has been shown in science, in good science, and undisputable science by, rigorous science. So this idea that it's not doing anything when you got your phone turned on because, look, if you're not a brain surgeon and no one's flying in an organ that has to be replaced, turn your friggin' phone off at night. You don't need your phone.
Yeah, you do not need to be connected.
Phone next to their bed. They got a router 6 feet away. On the other side of the wall, there's a router. These are all affecting sleep quality today.
100%. And these are simple changes you can do to protect yourself. Do it. To unplug everything at night. Learn to basically ground the body. Get yourself outside more. Take your shirt off, more skin exposure, because you're a solar panel. You're a solar panel. You need to accept that fact that your biology was built to walk around on the earth barefoot, wirelessly charging from the sun and being connected to the ground. We are a battery.
Do you have a website or someplace where you want people to go?
I just sort of resigned from the previous position. I'm working on this whole health coaching, whatever I'm trying to do thing. I don't have a website yet, but hopefully by the next time we do a show, I'll have a basic website up so people can just refer to me. I'm on LinkedIn, so if you search this, you can find me there and connect, and I can like go back and forth with you and help you out if you need any help. I think it may have frozen up here a little bit. Bro, I'm gonna send you the link. I just fucking murdered it on a fucking radio show. Superhumanradio.net. Once I get the link, I'm gonna send it to you, dude. You're gonna be fucking proud of me, dude. Like, this was I murdered it, dude. I really do want to learn all this stuff from you, man. Like, this is critical knowledge, and I don't know any of this stuff. So this is pretty amazing, dude. Like, all this stuff, this stuff they're trying to teach about the Bitcoin, these currencies, this and that. Like, it's just basic knowledge. I don't need to be fucking genius about it, but just begin to pull myself away from the grid so I can live the life the way I want to live it. I don't want to compromise any principle I have to live a religious life. I have to have the freedom to do that, and without this weird, having to like swallow evil shit to like survive. No way, man. Like, stop whatever the heck I was doing. I don't know how to explain it. Like, and it said, like, just let your heart ache. It's nothing bad's gonna happen.
Yeah, you're underneath, yeah. Okay, your shoe will be there. Everybody can see, okay?
Okay.
Yeah. Bye.
Can you hear me, Dr. Jenkins?
Yeah, I can hear you. Okay, just give
Can
him.
you hear? You can hear and see me.
He's just having a little bit of a technical difficulty. Just give us a couple of minutes.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
The technical difficulty is usually at this end, so don't worry.
Here we go.
Life is back to normal here. We had a complete crash of the video system, Dr. Jenkins. Welcome to the show. Sorry that.
Don't
Thank you.
worry. This is the electronic age. It always collapses.
I've actually, for the first time, I've actually started talking about retiring from doing this show. This is my 16th year.
Good Lord. Well, listen, you've got another 7 or 8 years before you're 25.
Yeah, but I'm tired of this part of it. But anyway, I'm fascinated and happy to have you here, Dr. Jenkins, because your research is really, really interesting to me. So first of all, your study was called Diet High in Poor Quality Carbohydrates Increases Heart Disease and Death. And I think by poor quality carbohydrates, we can say high glycemic index carbohydrates, the kind that spike insulin and seem to lead to body fat. Yeah. Why this research? What put you onto this that made this study necessary?
Well, I think we looked at this particular issue over 40 years ago and were fascinated by the fact that there was a big move, as you may remember, in the past to go to very low carb diets. It's come back again now. Obviously, we're talking about low carb diets now. The sort of the Atkins diet, the paleo diet, and the keto diet. I mean, these are all low carb diets. So these have become very popular, but they were beginning to be popular then with Atkins. And at that point, one felt, well, can one throw all the carbohydrates out? I mean, it means that you're really going to be on a sort of beef and eggs over easy diet. And that's going to be the solution to health. And it didn't seem right. I don't think it didn't seem right then. It doesn't seem right now. But at that point, we thought, well, are carbohydrates that bad? And so what we did is we tested them on ourselves, just because we thought diabetes is going to be the big target for this. If they don't raise your blood glucose levels too badly, then what's wrong? And what we found was that every food had its own glycemic index. In other words, every food raised your blood glucose level differently from the next food. So, for example, if you took bread, you got a relatively, certainly white bread, you took a relatively high rise in blood glucose. If you took the same amount of carbs as red lentils cooked, you got almost no rise in blood glucose. So this became it became very obvious to us that we had to classify them. So we put together the glycemic index, and that seems to have been useful in terms of its ability to reduce the risk of diabetes in populations who have a low glycemic index diet generally have lower incidence of diabetes. So that was fine. But then we thought, diabetes is so closely linked with the other major killer, heart disease, we really ought to be looking at that. And so we started looking at it and started looking at the ways in which it might cause oxidative stress, cause oxidative damage to tissues, damage to LDL cholesterol, uptake by the arterial wall, all these sort of things. And we've spent time exploring those over the last 40 years. And just recently, I think the reason that's attracted your interest is that we teamed up with Salim Youssef and his PHI group at Mabasta to look at their very, very big international study on populations around the planet with dietary data and obviously mortality data and disease data. And we thought this was excellent. We could then look and see in populations around the world whether there was general applicability of this principle and that it might relate to heart disease. And it would be association, obviously. It's not a clinical trial, but it's a strong association that I think you can get when you've got a large population base.
137,000 plus participants.
Precisely, and growing as they recruit more nations come under the Pure umbrella. So quite an amazing undertaking, I have to say.
And so you followed them for just under 10 years. And you looked at they were required to submit food diaries at the beginning of this
absolutely
project.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, is that the one potential flaw? I find that self-reporting suffers from an inherent over reporting of what is perceived as good behavior and underreporting of what is perceived as bad behavior. However, in this particular case, I think carbohydrate consumption has been good behavior because it's red meat and fat that has been demonized.
Correct. So I think that's important. And I think the other important thing for us was if you looked roughly, obviously it can't be detailed, but if roughly where the carbohydrate was eaten in the world, it was reflected in what they were recording. In other words, if in China and Southeast Asia, the sort of Indian subcontinent, you're looking for high carbohydrate intakes, that's where you find them. If you're looking for relatively lower carbohydrate intakes, then in Western populations, that's where you find them. So, I mean, in other words, macroscopically, if you like,
Right.
it seemed to be in turn consistent.
So what were some of the bad carbohydrate choices? I mean, obviously, you mentioned China, where white rice is a staple, and people will argue that, well, the Chinese don't have heart disease, so white rice is good for you, which, that's a absurd argument in general. But what were the culprit carbohydrates that you saw at work?
Well, I think the culprit carbohydrates are more of the refined wheat carbohydrates, tended to be those that seem to carry the weight with them. Whereas, and I think it's more important to talk about the useful ones because people tend to forget it. For a long time, we've tried to be encouraging people to eat fruit and vegetables. Those tend to be low glycemic index foods, and they are good carbohydrates. I don't know whether you've had any peas, beans, or lentils recently.
I do like lentil soup once in a while, to be honest with you.
Once in a while. Well, we're encouraging you to be more frequent with your use of the legume because that's a low glycemic index carbohydrate, and that seems to be at the other end of the scale of harm. So I think these foods tend to be good. Foods that, in fact, would be traditionally thought to be good. Many of them, not all, many of them are low glycemic index. And foods that we've always worried about, the highly processed foods, tend to be high glycemic index. And they also tend to have salt, and they all have other things with them which are not necessarily what you want. So I think in a way what we did is, I mean, what we were able to do with a big study like this is look at not just ranking them into different classes of foods, but also ascribing a glycemic index to that class and showing that that was the thing that related well. And it did. It related. I mean, if you ask me if I had any surprises, my surprise was at the strength of the significance. I was surprised by that.
Right. And especially, again, and not to belabor this, but we've been told since the 70s that heart disease is caused by a high red meat intake and a high fat intake. And I think your research requires some of those early scientists who came up with that to go back and look at their research again. And maybe it was the combination of high red meat with high glycemic index carbohydrates, because we know that oxidized fats in the presence of, say, sugars seem to become bad for us as opposed to just the fat by itself.
I think you're raising an important point. I mean, I think the really important point is that meat is part of the diet of many cultures. Fruit and vegetables are part of the diet of many cultures. Fish are part of the diet of some cultures. All these things are culture specific. And I think what we were surprised about was when you take away all those sort of, you include, if you like, all those sort of confounders so that you've got an almost completely confounded database. Something came out quite clearly to us, which was surprising. And it came out clearly, and we didn't have to do any more manipulation of the data. We planned what we were going to do. We did it. We didn't think it would come out that significantly, and it just came out. So I think that was satisfying. And I think you're very right too that we're talking about polypharmacy when we're talking about the diet.
Right.
I mean, it's many foods, it's many pharmacological agents of varying degrees of significance that we call our diet, and that is the diet. So I think, yes, I think I would say, what do we want to avoid? Well, you still want to avoid the highly processed foods. You would still want to avoid excessive salt intake, not modest salt intake.
Right. Right.
You want to still have your fruit and vegetables. You really should be doing that. And if you're not, well, you ought to, and they should be a major part of your carbohydrate. Use the legumes; they're excellent foods. Use many traditional foods. Things like German pumpernickel bread, which has been out of style, would be on the lower side of the glycemic index. Would be okay. There are other foods, tabbouleh, cracked wheat. A lot of the traditional dishes that have been eaten across the planet for millennia are vanishing. Are now becoming part of the McDonald's era. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So I think what all it says is what is probably obvious to you. We better retrace our steps a bit.
A recent study that we talked about on the show pointed out the most consumed foods in the United States, and contrary to what the media would have us believe, it's not red meat at all. In fact, the most consumed food in the United States is dairy, and that means drinkable milk and cheeses and yogurts. And so by far, the average American consumes about 40 to 50% of their diet from dairy, followed by fruits and vegetables. Red meat is a very, very small segment of that. This was enlightening to us here on the show because we're being told we eat too much red meat. But anyway, dairy tends to be considered a moderate glycemic index food, and obviously cheese very low because it has no lactose in it whatsoever. What are your thoughts on dairy consumption as it fits into this model that is emerging from your research?
Well, I think dairy, can I put it this way? I think we're not saying that all the foods that we've got as low glycemic index are necessarily good foods. We think that there's a predominance. We think there's a predominance of good foods amongst them. So I think that's important. And the reason why we got a relationship with glycemic index and cardiovascular disease is because you're not obviously eating too much of those foods to obscure the effects of the better foods.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, to be very honest with you, I'd be very remiss if I didn't say at this point that those of us who are particularly interested in nutrition are now leaning very closely and very, very strongly towards environmental sustainability. And
Yeah.
I think we've really got to include that in what we do and what we say. And so I'm saying that the foods that I'm sort of giving you now are the foods that I think are low glycemic index and sustainable. And those are the things that I think should be the Homo sapiens diet of the future. And in terms of meat intake, I have to declare that I'm a vegan, so you can say I'm as crazy as you like, and that's fine. But I do declare that. But I think it's also worth mentioning that we've had a reduction in cardiovascular disease, which has been quite spectacular over the last 30 years. I don't think you can put it all down to statins. I think it's certainly something in the way that we've changed our diets to some extent. We've grown fat because there are other things we're doing which are not right. But I do think when I was a medical student, meat intake was far higher than it is right now. And we had real trouble with not ICUs, but coronary care units. We didn't have the number of coronary care units we needed. So that was a real thing. And so I've watched with some pleasure to see that our cardiovascular disease rates have been falling. As I say, drugs, basic therapies, surgery, but I think also some dietary patterns.
The last thing I want to talk about, if you will, is that, the focus is on glucose, blood glucose levels quite often. But I think the focus should be on insulin, insulinogenic response, hyperinsulinemia, because as a person becomes pre-diabetic, while their blood sugar levels may still be in an acceptable range, their pancreas is working overtime in order to manage and keep it in that acceptable range. And I've done a lot of reading about hyperinsulinemia. And ironically, the damage done by insulin may actually be the problem with type 2 diabetes, as opposed to the damage done by glucose levels. We see vascular changes that are horrible in the face of high insulin levels. We see increases in senescent cell accumulation, which is now the favorite cell of the anti-aging community. mTOR is bad. Well, insulin is the most anabolic hormone we produce, and it flips on mTOR in a second. So should doctors rarely check blood glucose and insulin in their patients? They just check glucose. Isn't this a mistake? Shouldn't doctors be checking glucose and so if someone has an acceptable blood sugar level, but they're putting out tons and tons of insulin to manage that, shouldn't they be advised that they have to change their diet?
Well, I think so. But what you're talking about in many ways is the metabolic syndrome, because that's the insulin resistance syndrome. And basically, if you start to see someone who's got a bit of let's talk about simple things. You can do a finger stick for glucose, and you can see where the glucose level is. Basically, you can do a quick blood pressure on someone and see what their blood pressure is. You can do a quick measurement around their waist and see what their girth is. These are things that you can do, and you can go send off to the lab and get an HDL and a triglyceride level, and those are quite quickly. And you can come to a conclusion of metabolic syndrome in its entirety. And you can also look at the actual outcomes that you have to fix. And if you get someone who's got a large waist circumference and doesn't look well on his BMI, their BMI on the scales is not good, then you know you've got someone who's going to, you don't have to measure it. You'll know that there's going to be insulin resistance there, and you know what they've got to do, and you know that they've got to lose weight, and you know that that's going to be difficult.
Yeah, it is, because patient compliance is tough enough just getting people to take pills, never mind change their diet and lifestyle.
That's my worry.
Dr. Jenkins, I think your work is very fascinating, and it's a very important contribution to nutrition in general, because we are, the more we understand about, we tend to oversimplify nutrition. And in the words of my good friend Joel Green, we talk baby talk. Carbs are good, meat is bad. And the reality is it's much more intricate, and it's also much more individual, because you can have people that can have healthy lives as vegans and then other people who can't. And I think that we have to stop with the baby talk, and we need to start paying attention to the nuances. And I think your study proves that, because it's not about carbohydrates. It's about the type of carbohydrates that people are eating.
Well, you've known that for fats for a long time.
Yeah.
And you begin to get some idea for proteins too. So, I mean, you're right. We've got to be more differentiated.
Thank you for being here today. Sorry for the technical difficulties connecting with you at the beginning of the show.
We're fine.
Take care. Take care.
Same to you. Bye-bye.
And that's it for today. Hopefully, it looks like we're going to have more technical difficulties right now. There's some sort of latency in the internet today that is causing all sorts of problems for me. I apologize, but the audio podcast is fine. So those of you who listen to the audio podcast will not have to suffer any of this. All right, look, we'll see you tomorrow with more Superhuman Radio. Thank you for being here today.